So with prices going up these days, I thought it would be the best time to answer a question I've had for a long time. And that is, what is the best way to make seitan for the least amount of dough? So as I researched this seemingly simple question, it led me to others like, is wash the flour method always cheaper than using gluten flour? And what type of flours provide the best value? So to figure this out, we're gonna do side-by-side tests to get us closer to the answer. We're gonna use two different chicken seitan recipes, one for wash the flour and one for Vital Wheat gluten. The first test is wash the flour chicken. We'll do Vital Wheat gluten here in a bit, so first let's take a closer look at the products we'll be comparing. As far as flour goes, it is wild how many different products you can buy and at different price points. So to narrow it down, I stuck to two types, bread flour and all-purpose flour. So simply put, bread flour has more gluten in it than all-purpose flour, and that's because of the type of the wheat that they use in the manufacturing process. So since there's more gluten in bread flour, you would think that that would be the best one to use, right? Now hold on though. While all-purpose flour might have less gluten, all-purpose is generally cheaper, so you might get less gluten per gram, but that gluten might be cheaper. So for the all-purpose battle, we'll be using King Arthur brand with 11.7 gluten content and comparing it against the economical store brand. For this, we'll use Kroger's, which for those who don't know, Kroger is the largest grocery chain in the US, so anyone here should have access to it. And in the other corner, we have bread flour. We'll be using King Arthur for consistency's sake, clocking in at 12.7% gluten. And off the bat, I'm already wondering if the extra 1% of gluten is worth the extra $2.50 cost per bag, so we'll have to test that out. And for the store brand, we'll be using Safeway brand. Anyway, let's put these to the test. To make the chicken, I weighed out 1 kilogram each flour and hydrated them all with 3 cups water, mixing until they were all incorporated. I rested them for 2 hours-ish to let the gluten develop. All of them were fine except for the Kroger all-purpose. It got kind of globby. You doing okay there, buddy? I washed out the starch. All of them were roughly the same, except for the King Arthur bread flour, which had massive gluten strands. I could play the banjo on this thing. And here are 2 of them directly after. After the full washes, they all looked the same dough, though. I weighed them out and then used that to make 6 equal servings. The weight differences were significant, and I'll share them here in a bit. For the seasonings, I used poultry seasonings, salt, MSG nooch, onion powder, and garlic powder. I then pulsed each in a food processor, blending in batches for roughly 6 seconds to incorporate. After another rest and shaping, I fried them up and simmered them in chickenless broth. I then stored them in containers so they can get their final rest in. Now let's get to our Vital Wheat gluten test. For our gluten flour test, we're gonna be using Anthony's Goods and Bob's Red Mill brand gluten flour. If you've made Vital Wheat gluten seitan before, chances are you've purchased one of these brands. Both have incredibly similar nutrition facts, but I'm really excited to try these side by side as many people have strong allegiance to one over the other. For this, I blended tofu and seasonings in a food processor and added Vital Wheat gluten, processed them a bit more, shaped them, and besides one being a slightly different color, they were exactly the same to work with, so no difference there. I baked them and simmered, and then put them in the fridge for the final test. All right, so we're gonna let these rest up for the night, and then we're gonna test them out in the morning. All right, after a little frying, we're ready to test. We've got Bob's Red Mill, have Anthony's. Well, both are really good. They don't have any difference in flavor at all. At least not to me. So with that said, let's go ahead and see how the grain is. I mean, both have great shred. And you know, this isn't surprising because they're essentially the same product. I mean, you look at the nutrition label, they're roughly exactly the same. So I'm not surprised at all by this, but texture and taste-wise, they're absolutely the same. At the time of filming, it cost this much for Bob Red Mills and this much for Anthony's per kilogram, and that's about 2.2 pounds or so. Really, I think it comes down to what brand you prefer. For me, I think the highest value brand is gonna be the Anthony's brand. Now, we're not done yet. We still have one big question to answer, and that is, what is the best value flour for wash the flour method seitan? All right, first thing is first, we need to taste test all of these and see if there is a difference at all between them. This is the King Arthur bread flour. Had a good flavor to it. This is the store brand bread flour. King Arthur all-purpose. This one has so far the best texture. Then we got the store brand all-purpose. Let's see how this one goes. Both all-purposes have better texture than the bread flours. I don't know if it's because I washed them differently or what, but it's a minor difference. So I think all 4, you could probably be fine with texture. So let's go ahead and rank these by value. So a big consideration for this is how much gluten do you get after you wash? And the results was not surprising. The store brand was first, followed by King Arthur All-Purpose, and then store brand bread flour, and then King Arthur bread flour. It's not as simple as what provides the most gluten. In that case, the King Arthur bread flour would win hands down. It's the cost of that gluten per what you buy. Let's rank these by value, starting with least value to full value. So number 3, the least value, I think, is the King Arthur All-Purpose. Now, don't get me wrong, I love me some King Arthur All-Purpose. I use it all the time for baking breads and other things. It's just not built for this application. For the amount you pay for the bag, you don't get a lot of gluten. So I just don't think the value's there. So coming in at number 2 is gonna be the store brand all-purpose. However, if you are looking for the absolute cheapest way to make seitan, this is the way to do it. So you might have been wondering why my ranking system started at 3 when there are 4 here, and that is because there is a tie between the store brand bread flour and the King Arthur bread flour. So the King Arthur bread flour costs a little bit more, but it gave me over 100 grams more yield of gluten per kilogram of flour. So if I'm gonna be doing the labor of wash the flour method, I'm gonna want as much yield out of that, and if it costs 30 cents more or $1 more or whatever it was, I'll put the math up on the screen, then I'm gonna pay that within reason, obviously. But all that said, I would say you can't go wrong with any of these. So I'm curious if any of this information surprised anybody out there. If you agree or disagree, I would love to hear about this in the comments. Obviously, this is a very non-scientific test, just something I did with different bags of flour in my own kitchen. So I'd love to hear about your experience in the comments below. And until next time, y'all, be nice to each other and keep cooking.